Welcome to Elevated Practice, where we interview masters and mavericks within the field of holistic medicine and uncover unconventional stories in the field of health and wellness. I'm your host, Gretchen Badami, and every episode I'll be interviewing clinicians, scholars, entrepreneurs, and educators who share their wisdom and ideas with you. Are you ready to elevate your practice? Let's begin today's episode. I'd like to extend a big thank you to Handcraft Health for sponsoring Elevated Practice and empowering integrative healthcare practitioners to create personalized healthcare packages for their patients. Create a free account today and elevate your practice at www.handcraft.health. And now, on to today's episode. Hello, I'm here today with Cara Frank, who is an acupuncturist and herbalist, educator, businesswoman, and author. Cara is the founder of 3 companies: Six Fishes Healing Arts, with 2 locations in Philadelphia, China Herb Company, and in recent years, she has launched China Herb Seminars. She's been a clinician for over 40 years, beginning her studies when she was only 20 at the New England School of Acupuncture in the years before acupuncture licensure existed. She's been an educator for 30 years, founding 2 herb departments in East Asian medicine schools, was an original item writer for the NCC AOM Herbology exam, and is the author of the book TCM Case Studies, Eye, Ears, Nose, and Throat Disorders. Cara, thank you for joining us here today.
That's a heck of an introduction. It's so nice to be here with you.
Thank you. There's more. I could have said more. You know, when I began thinking about what we could discuss today, I was initially really overwhelmed by the possibilities of topics that we could discuss, because you have extensive firsthand experience and insight into the development of the practice of this medicine in the United States over the past 40 years. You have worked on a grassroots level and through legislation and education of Chinese medicine. And there are so many topics that we really could have discussed.
Well, we could take one off the table right now, which is I don't think I'm a brilliant acupuncturist.
Well, next time I'll talk to you about acupuncture, and you'll prove that statement to be wrong, I'm sure. But
all I know how to do is call chi to me or through me. That's what I do.
You've done interviews over the years talking about your history in the medicine. You did an excellent interview on Qiological podcast. I saw a great written interview in a business magazine, Medium, where you talked about being a female entrepreneur and businesswoman.
Oh, yeah. Wait, I think, was it Medium or was it, something like that? It was businessy online thing.
Yeah, it was great. And so for any of our practitioners who are listening, I really enjoyed reading that one as well. And so I thought, okay, what can we discuss? And I think one of our mutually agreed upon favorite topics is herbs.
Yeah, we have that in common.
So in our discussion of herbs today, I wanted to start by having you talk a little bit more about your love affair of herbs and where that began and where that deepened. I understand that your love for herbs really blossomed in China, in Beijing.
Yeah. But if I think about the very roots of it, when I was a kid, when I was 11, my mother opened a health food store in the first floor of our house in Brooklyn. And so we had big glass jars, and, we had like granola and dried apricots and macaroons and cashews. But I spent so much time like arranging the bags of granola. So I think I was just like primed to be with herbs. And so after I graduated from NISA and I moved back to New York, then Ted started teaching a class in Philly. So I started coming down. And I was his scribe. He just said, write down every single thing I say in a copy of the Materia Medica and Formulas and Strategies. It's like, okay, great.
And this was Ted Kapchuk.
Yeah, Ted Kapchuk. Yeah, he was my teacher at NISA, and I interned with him for a year. So I was pretty lucky. Then in the middle of that, I got busted for practicing without a license in New York. I didn't really get busted. That's an exaggeration. I got a call saying I was going to be investigated. And so I shut down. I moved to the Catskills. I hid out. It was very traumatic.
Because there was no licensure at that point.
There was no law, right? And we were all doing it this way, but somebody filed a complaint. Not that I had done anything wrong, but that I was practicing. And then a friend who was wealthy gave me $2,500, and I thought, what am I going to do with this? I'm going to go to China. So I went to the Xiyuan Hospital in Beijing because my friends had gone there and they really liked the program. And I flew out. And this was 88. So before Tiananmen Square. So different world back then. And we lived at Beijing, at the dorms at Beijing University. And then we got bikes and we biked over to the hospital every day and went through 9 or 10 different departments where the head of the department would present cases with the patients right there. And then most afternoons, we then had didactic class. But the patient part was very exciting. And that was a pivotal point for me. That's when I just fell in love with herbs. There was no going back. And I was an herbalist. Just like when I graduated acupuncture school at 23, it's like, oh, I know everything. Like, I can do this. But yet, back then, nobody was talking about the Shanghai Lun, or nobody was talking about the structure of Dui Yaos or relationships. Each doctor had these, they're kind of like muscular modifications that you would see over and over and over for their patients, including like the head of cardiology with acute MI and those formulas. But nobody said that this formula is from the Shanghai Lun, or this is the way you modify it. So there was no paradigm for that at that time. And there really weren't historical texts available to us. I think who started doing that in the beginning was Bob Flaws, who just started in like rapid speed translating everything he could, which was really great for us. And then they translated the Shanghai Lun, and then the world moved forward and shapeshifted. But meanwhile, I got home. I decided I'm going to have a pharmacy, and I start ordering herbs. Like I write a formula. I'd write a formula for you. Then I would get them blue labeled, like second day sent over to me so I could fill it. And then meanwhile, some acupuncturists in town said, oh, my accountant said I have to close my pharmacy. Will you fill the formulas? And I'm like, okay. And then Bill Egloff from Crane Enterprise said, oh, we get calls for raw herbs because they were brand new too. We met actually in herb class. He said, will you fill them? I'm like, yeah. So that was China Herb. It just happened like a lot of things in my life. I just like see an opportunity. I go, yeah.
So you were doing something that other herbalists weren't doing. Through your time in China, you learned a bit of a different way, more confidence, a different strategy for structuring and prescribing formulas.
That came later. I would say even in the early classes that I taught, because people were like, you need to teach a class. I'm like, okay, like I usually do. And at that time, it was only 300 hours, 50 hours of which were clinic. So I taught a 250-hour class. And it was really like in those days, pretty by the books. Like that was what we had, was a book. And then they would spend 50 hours in the clinic in the China Herb, filling formulas and learning that. And then I had to stop teaching because the NCCOM or ACOM said you can only teach herbs and sit for the exam if it's through an ACOM accredited school. So, Sharon Weizenbaum had been teaching. She stopped teaching in that way, like basic classes. I stopped teaching in that way. And then I just was practicing, and I wasn't really teaching for a while, but I can't tell you how long. I don't remember. But in maybe 2012 or 13, Thai Sophia was starting an herb department, and I applied. Meanwhile, I was a single mother in Philly and I had to figure out how to do that. So I had these weekend classes once a month. And at this point, it escalated. It became at least 450 hours. And maybe we just jumped right to 600 hours with extensive clinic. So I created the department, I created the curriculum, I built the dispensary, I created all the guidelines and processes and herb labels. And then we actually brought that program to regional, like middle states accreditation and national accreditation through ACOM.
Okay.
So, and then after a few years, maybe 3 cycles of it, I was done with that program. I was done with the commute. It was getting hard. I don't love admin, but the One Institute was starting a program and I agreed to do that.
And that's right there in Philadelphia, right?
And that's in the Philly area. Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the cool things about that program is it's a religious school. They're Wan Buddhists, and the core values of the religion is meditation. So I had to incorporate those values into my program. So I taught herb meditation. I would teach whatever I was doing, but I would cook a formula germane to the topic. And we'd have little Dixie cups of them. And then I would have them smell it and then taste it and swallow and then feel what happened to their chi. like, have
Uh,
a physical experience, so they were immediately engaged in that, and that was a
yeah.
very beautiful thing, and since that time, I think, lots of people have taken that on. Like, I think Everett Rabinowitz, he adopted it, and probably the person who took over for him took it on. It's a good thing, so it's great that it's spread.
I mean, gosh, what a beautiful idea. And were the students, as they were in class, were they able to say, "Wow, I feel this acrid release," or "I feel the sour condensing"? Could they feel how the tastes affected the mood?
Absolutely, yeah, they began to be attuned to the taste because, flavors, of course, are an action. You don't just taste it, flavors are dynamic and they're doing something, and it would sometimes be very funny. You'd have a Coptis formula, and there'd be one person going and the other
I was
person
gonna
going,
say, formally on,
"Wow."
right?
I'd be like, "Bring it on." But anyway, like a chai hu formula, just watching everybody's face relax was so
Yeah,
sweet, just
yeah.
sweet as anything.
What a great way to really personalize the herbs and have the students have an experience that it's not just something you read in a book, that these herbs have an action and you can feel it and you can explain it and understand it.
Yeah, yeah, so sometime around 2008 or so, I started studying with Dr. Huang Huang, and maybe that was my first deeper immersion in the Shanghanlan. I was starting to study Wen Bing, it was just like whatever classics were available. He really was a huge influence on me, and actually, I'm gonna go to Portugal to study with him in the fall. I'm excited about that. He's so clear. He's a real joy. Yeah, what else? That was a
And
long
so
answer.
so you came back, you were teaching, you were creating these programs for these schools, and you at some point, and I think you said this was around the time of the pandemic, you actually started a seminar company where you are now helping to elevate students' understanding and confidence of learning herbs through this online education platform.
Right. So I left Iwan Institute and then I wasn't really teaching a lot. But during the pandemic in Pennsylvania, acupuncture, we're licensed by the Board of Medicine. So we are essential. We didn't have to close, but the world was closed. And so we pivoted, like many, immediately to telehealth. But because we had herbs at Six Fishes, we had something meaningful that we could offer to people. And, at first the thread was immunity, 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 but then it went back to, oh, my fertility, oh, my IBS. So, all the things that they were dealing with
Life is still
and
happening.
anxiety and insomnia and depression. And I saw all these acupuncturists, we're all on Facebook. And many people are just completely shut down because they're not essential. And despite grants and loans and all that stuff, they were in financial trouble. And I just had this thought, like, I can give this to people. I can teach them how to do this. It's not that they haven't studied herbs. It's not that they're not nationally certified. It's that they don't have the confidence
Yeah.
to think slowly. But then I also realized that we had to emphasize visual and inquiry based diagnosis because you can't feel a pulse, you can't palpate a body. And those are real disadvantages. So you have to ask more questions. There is something, and I didn't coin this, there's something called website manner, how to answer and ask questions and make sure people have fully answered and you're listening or, fully gotten everything out instead of saying like anything else. You just what else would you like to talk about? Just switching that language, for instance.
Yeah.
Lighting, backgrounds, all this stuff. The legal terrain has changed a lot because then it was the Wild West and you could just practice anywhere and do anything. Now it depends on your insurance whether you can practice telehealth across state lines.
Mm,
A lot of people are couching it as coaching, which mixed feelings about, but you know.
yeah. Because we're making prescriptions, so is it really
Well,
coaching?
we're not prescribing, we're recommending.
Right.
So, all that languaging, but I have insurance that allows me to practice anywhere because the location of my office is my office.
For our listeners who are wondering about that, is it just a difference in different malpractice companies, in which ones
Yeah,
cover telehealth and which ones don't?
I believe so because this is a question I asked carefully, repeatedly,
Okay.
because like, they're there, I'm here.
Yeah. Good information for people to be aware of to make sure they're asking their providers if they're planning on doing that.
Absolutely. Make sure you're covered. Yeah, absolutely. You need to be in compliance. And then the other thing is I talked about logistics. Like, okay, where are you going to get your herbs? How are you going to do this? How are you going to deal with the mail? I talked about my company, but I also talked about all the others as well. I didn't want to be like a total Nepo class. And then I moved into other topics like digestion, respiratory system, respiratory illnesses, and gynecology, which was sort of regular and sort of still tilting towards we're doing something by asking and we don't have needles.
Hmm.
So that was kind of a lot of people enrolled in that. After that, I developed a pediatric class. I developed a cholesterol class, and I am literally putting the finishing touches on my final lecture for my 19 credit ophthalmology comprehensive course.
Which is going to be amazing, and so many practitioners shy away from treating vision disorders, both with acupuncture and with herbs. It's something that people don't often think that they can even tell their practitioner that they have those issues. They just go to a conventional, ophthalmologist.
You'd be amazed. Well, there definitely are times you absolutely have to go to an ophthalmologist. Like if you tear your retina, for crying out loud, get it stitched. And there's also many diseases where you want to work in tandem with an ophthalmologist. There's diseases where, well, like cataracts, for instance. There's this big bucket of like inflammatory things, and then there's this bucket of degenerative
Mhm.
diseases, and they're all rooted in oxidative damage. And so each lecture, it's like, okay, here's the general handful of lutein and zeaxanthin and fish oils and all that stuff. It's all the same repeatedly for the most part. Even the TCM acupuncture that I had access to is not so exciting, just differentiating body points. I actually stopped including it because I just felt like this is kind of lame and I'm not going to waste class time. I would
Mm.
rather talk about formulas.
Because if you're doing acupuncture for eye conditions, you're going to be treating the underlying pattern, and then you're going to be doing
And then you're doing
points that
local
are going to
points.
guide the
Correct.
cheated eyes. Yeah.
Right. But I guess my point with cataracts was that many people have early onset cataracts. And then at that point, you really want to slow it down because if you're in your 40s, you don't want to be having surgery in your 40s. So that's when it's very valuable, for instance.
Preventative medicine, right? If you know that you're having a visual disturbance of any sort, and cataracts is one example, I'm sure macular degeneration and other things where you're starting to notice a progression of loss of vision,
Hmm.
treat it before it gets bad and before you need surgery and before you lose your vision.
Correct. Correct. And there's a lot you can do to help, a lot you can do.
So in your ophthalmology course,
Mhm.
you have a handful of disorders where you discuss the conventional diagnosis, and then you talk about patterns and ways to treat that with herbal medicine?
Yeah. So generally, my thing is like, I'll define it in Western medicine. What is this disease? I generally try to like look at the epidemiology of it. Then I look at Western treatments. Okay. Then we launch into Chinese medicine. And the first thing I always try to do is talk about terminology. And then I define that. And then we talk about sort of the general patterns and recommended formulas and then modifications from there. And that's sort of the process for every single disease.
Okay. Okay. And so as you're developing this course now, and you have a number of cases that you discuss, and then you walk through and you discuss the herbs. Do you have some examples that you want to talk about today? I think that giving some practitioners a little bit of a window into how to think about herbs when they look to treat particular diagnoses and particular cases. Are there any that you find particularly interesting that you'd like to share today?
Well, okay. So I just finished a lecture. Oh, by the way, I do include cases from China or my own practice in as many lectures as I possibly can. But okay, so I just finished, this is the second to last lecture on myopia, which
Mhm.
was requested by a lot of people. And then I did visual fatigue, which is eye strain. And it's because we all have this from computers. And there were a couple of incredibly fun surprises for me. One was, do you know the formula Ding Zhi Wan? It's like mind settling pill, and it's like ginseng and shurtang and it's a very short formula. It's to calm the spirit, but it's used, there's with myopia, there's kind of like your typical what you would expect liver kidney deficiency, maybe spleen deficiency. But then they talk about the heart. And because the heart, the spirit is emanated from the eyes, right? It's the first thing we diagnose, and the ability to relate to the world. And so if that's your diagnosis, if somebody is myopic and anxious and this is their constellation, the formula that they start with was Danger One. Isn't that like
Oh,
amazing?
wow. To connect the person's spirit and to open it back up at the orifices.
Yeah, I thought that was just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And then with visual fatigue, so you'd think, okay, this is a deficient pattern. Actually, it wasn't. It was this hybrid of deficiency, like I'm tired, and constraint. I'm tired and my eyes are strained and stressed.
Mm.
Right now that I say it, it sounds so obvious, right? But
That sounds like that would be a great formula for all of us who are staring at our computers all day long.
yeah, we all need like an IV of it. Like those are some surprising examples. But I think everybody in school learns that there's these five wheels of the eye, right? It's like an ear. It's like there's a correspondence, right?
Yes.
So different
Yes.
parts of the eye relate to different organs. The thing is, it would be nice if you could be really tidy and just say, oh well, everything with the whites of the eye, the sclera, is always going to be a lung formula or herbs that
Mm.
enter the lung. And I wish that was true, except that actually you have to fold in every single diagnostic paradigm. And I just was writing about this in the conclusion, because if you just stay in this narrow lane, you're like, if you had conjunctivitis, for instance, well, that could be fire, it could be heat, it
Right.
could be damp heat, it could be a whole lot of things. So you have to look at all of those, look at every single inside, outside,
Doesn't always fit
all the
neatly into just the
pathogens.
5 elements and the colors.
No, no. It would be nice and simple if it was, but it isn't.
But diagnosing an underlying pattern is still the way to go when you're looking at eye disorders. You're still looking, what are the excesses? What are the pathogens, right? And then is there a deficiency, excess or deficiency? So you're gonna say, is there dampness or heat or stagnation even, right? And then
You'd even be surprised how often you're only treating a person. There aren't necessarily eye herbs in there.
can you give me some examples of that?
Sure. Well, going back to myopia, because that's so recent in my head. When there's spleen deficiency, a common formula was Tongue with
Uh,
almost no modifications. There wasn't anything that went to the eye. Uh, but then there are some very unexpected and surprising um, modifications, like the use of Mugua for some like paralytic eye movement disorders, because they're saying, well, actually, it is antispasmodic, and this one
yeah.
modern ophthalmologist feels like it has to do with like the sinews of the eyes, and so it wants to relax that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that lovely?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So herbs that we don't normally think of for eyes. And then where is the place for herbs that we do think of for eyes, right? So if you're thinking like your Jui Mingzi or your Shakusao or your, I don't know, Juhua, like herbs that we
Then you're
say,
gonna
oh,
you
vision.
will see those, shakusai you're gonna see in a formula for red eyes, and juhua you're gonna see either in a dry eye formula or with
Mhm.
like a mild wind heat, like seasonal allergies, things like that.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
eyes being reddened. All the dihuanguans are, are almost always found in deficiency patterns.
Yes. Yes.
But, like, if you're, like, thinking about, say okay, really geek out on you. Okay, so, there's all the Dihuang ones, right? And then, so there's 3 tonic herbs and there's 3 draining herbs, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that it creates a balance and it's lovely and it's tried and time tested and easy. But, like, if you're thinking about, say, vitreous humor, right? Then you have to be thinking about the thick yin. So you would go more to like a Zhuogui one because you're
Um,
really thinking about it's called the spirit jelly, the Shen Gao. That's the
yes.
vitreous humor. Okay, I have a patient. I've been dealing with this um following him for months. First he had a torn retina, so then he had a stitch and it was not healing well. So I said, okay, well let me try to do something because it's red and muddy looking, not good. Did that, the eye improved, great. But then he had a kind of immune response where his other eye became red and inflamed. That was a referred pattern. So then I treated that. This was his sclera, but it was like damp heat and dirty. So I knew it because it had kind of a yellowy color. So it's like a tongue, right? I look at it, you know how to read a tongue. And if you just let yourself, you just know how to read an eye. Okay. And that clears up beautifully. But oh my God, his optic pressure is low.
So
Low, as in the eyeball can collapse. It's a
wow.
balloon, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you have glaucoma and the optic pressure is too high, like if it kept going, the eye would burst. But so I shifted everything. I made sure there was no damp draining herbs. I rewrote the formula
Hmm.
to be fully like juicy, deeply thick yin, yeah,
Hmm.
fluid, nourishing.
Yeah.
So I'll see about that. I don't know the results of that, but the reason I'm telling you that also is because that's nowhere in any literature at all. But I knew how to think about it.
Yes. Yes. So how to
Right.
think about creating formulas based on what we've learned and
Right.
applying those to both the anatomy, the structure, as well as the functional aspects of what all the parts of the eye are representing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I did like a Instagram post or something about a kid, 18-year-old girl. She had COVID, and this post-COVID reaction, she woke up and she couldn't see. So her mother took her to we have two eye hospitals here. And turns out she had something kind of like diabetic retinopathy. Like she had all this weird vascularization and vascular blocks. And the doctor said, there's nothing we can do. You're probably going to go blind. So dad called me and I said, well, you know what? I haven't treated this, but because who has? Right. But I said, but I know how to think about it.
Yeah.
And so I ended up giving her a kind of modified shui fu juyutong, and she's completely fine. Her vision is perfect.
Let's pause for a moment to extend a big thank you to our sponsor, Handcraft Health. I prescribe a lot of herbal medicine in my practice, and quite frankly, I don't want to spend the overhead keeping hundreds of herbs and supplements on hand. Since the pandemic, I do a lot of telehealth consults and ship patients their prescriptions. Handcraft Health has been my lifesaver. It allows me to have a successful and streamlined practice and saves me money and office space. I am not tech savvy, but the platform is really straightforward for me to write and easy for my patients to pay online and receive their orders at home. It's free for practitioners to open a Handcraft Health account. It's just handcraft.health and only takes a few minutes to sign up. It's one of the easiest choices you'll make to do what you do best. And now, back to our episode. So as long as the practitioner, even if you haven't treated something before, right, a particular diagnosis, because there's a infinite number of diagnoses that someone could receive, as long as you can backtrack and take it down to the pattern, right, and what the root is and what the branch
Correct.
symptoms represent in terms of the diagnostics, you can treat this confidently as a practitioner with
You
herbs.
can. You can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it requires a couple things. One is the capacity to look, like literally with your eyes, but to like see it
Yeah.
and like, and identify a pattern. And the other is having a tiny bit of fluency with formulas.
Yes.
Right.
So you have to
So,
understand what the formulas are supposed to be treating within the body and how those can then be applied to the eyes with some modifications.
right. Right. I mean, I could have done the Tong Chou Hu Shui Tong, which is that formula by the same author, Wang Qingren, which is more for like concussions. I could have done that. Well, first of all, the original formula is musk, which very strongly opens the orifices, right, for loss of consciousness. But I went with this anyway. So those are just some examples. So this is what like the muscle I try to build with my students. I have
Yeah.
people who I mentor is getting them comfortable and getting them on track and then selecting a formula and then being comfortable to modify it.
When you've taught so many students now, and in reference to herbs, what would you say are some of the barriers to students' confidence with herbs? Because of course, most people do learn them in school. Certainly, there are some schools that don't cover herbs, but most of them do. But yet, even in my experience as an educator, and I teach herbs, I see so many students who then get out into practice and just are not confident with is do you feel like it goes back to the diagnosis? Do you feel like it goes back to students not having the herbs on hand, so they just don't bother to use them? Where is the disconnect with the training and the actual prescription of herbal medicine?
Yeah, I'm going to answer it, and then I would also like to hear your answer
Okay.
because you use herbs in your practice.
I do.
So
Mm.
I'm curious what makes it alive for you.
Yeah.
But there's a whole bunch of impediments. One is an internalized bias. Oh, my patients won't take it. Oh, my patients
Mhm.
don't spend money. Oh, my patients don't want something that tastes yucky. I never find that's a problem. I'm entirely congruent with my herbs, and I bet you are too,
Yes.
right? Take this. This will help. Oh, it might taste bad. Big deal. You're a grown up.
Yeah.
Get over it. Also, I'm bossy.
Which you should be as an authority.
So there's that. Then there is actually, I think you know what this is. You have to put some time into it. It's a rigorous field. It's
Yeah.
complicated, but you can make it simpler. Like you could work only with formulas from the Shanhan Lun. Then you've got like 50 herbs and 50 formulas, and you can treat such a range of human conditions,
Yeah.
right? So you
Yeah.
could narrow the field to make it doable.
Yeah.
But people, they don't use the muscle, the herb muscle of doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it and writing and writing and writing. And then doing something like looking at it critically. So, like maybe combining too many patents. I mean, there
Mhm.
are traditions of formula. Like
Yeah.
Jimmy Chang, who teaches a ton for Lotus, that's his method, formula. But if you keep going with that, you can have bad redundancy. Everything is Fu Ling. Well, then that person might get dried out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so on, like that. So at least you have to know how to discriminate that.
Yeah. Right, in that case, if you're combining a bunch of formulas together, you all of a sudden got 45 different herbs within 3 different formulas, and does the body know what to do with that, and how many grams of each herb are actually in the formula at that point?
That too. That too. Oh, that's another thing. They lack confidence in dosing. This seems to be a point of agony for so many of my students. Like it's nearly ubiquitous. How do
Yeah.
you dose a person? You kind of just start with what's in the books, and then just like medicine, you make an adjustment based on their response, right? If they got some results but not a lot, maybe they need more. Maybe the formula needs changing, but you can dial the dose up or down.
Yeah. So many times I see practitioners who don't give enough dose, and then they say, "Oh, it's not working," and then they give up, and that's
That's
it.
another thing, right? Right. So for a chronic problem, you want to give lower doses over a long period of time. But I'll tell you what, when I'm treating bronchitis or something acute, I am muscling it. I want robust doses. I want them to take the herbs every 3 or 4 hours.
Yes.
We want to be, like if somebody has bronchitis, if they have yellow phlegm, I want it to be paler tomorrow. I want the next day to be white.
Yes.
They don't have to be better, but they have to be improving. Otherwise, we make a different decision around antibiotics.
Yes, because they work and you've seen them work, and, maybe it was rooted in your time in China when you saw herbs prescribed in a hospital, and then you had the confidence to then prescribe
Hmm.
them yourself. I think when students are in school and they're prescribing herbs in the clinic, they may give a formula, in the clinic. You don't always have patients who come back even, or they're
Mm,
coming in for the low cost of the clinic. They may not be able to afford the herbs, or the students may dose them very low, and then the patients come back and say they don't work. I don't want to pay for it again. I don't know that the students develop the confidence in school based on their experience in the clinic of seeing how powerful the herbs are that they can work.
yeah.
I'm not
It's
sure.
it's a big it's a big thing to have taken the 660 course and then be a dead beginner.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. But I would say definitely in education, in my experience, it all goes back to lack of confidence. And that even starts when students are learning herbs. I found that even just remembering the individual herbs in the pinyin is difficult. So I always make all my students learn the Latin. They have to. I test them on the Latin. They know both the pinyin and the Latin because they'll remember one of them. and
Right.
and knowing what the herb is. This is guejur. People forget the name, but it's cinnamon and they can remember that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, yeah, but this medicine is so powerful, and I love it that you're treating internal medicine. You're treating things like eye disorders and ear, nose, and throat disorders and serious serious medical conditions with the power of herbal medicine.
Right. I think if you want to specialize in internal medicine, which I would consider myself to do, then you really need herbs in your toolkit.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
really do. I was going to say something about what was I going to say about another place? Oh, right. So when I teach, I have this process called slow diagnosis, and the idea is like to get their anxiety out of their prefrontal cortex, and then literally breathe, and then literally ask, like, how do I know what I know for sure? What am I seeing in front of me for sure? And so, when I have a sheet for case studies, and, it goes through a case study, but it's like, what do you know about this? What are you thinking about this? What supports that? To like bring them through that process more slowly.
Yes, and giving them a place where they can start with confidence that what they're treating will be accurate.
Yeah. So like I was mentoring this guy this morning, and it's a long COVID case, and the woman has a ton of inflammation and body aches, and so I started bringing up this idea of retained pathogens, which is one of the gifts of Chinese medicine, is to explain this and have solutions for this, right? You catch something, it's not resolved, and then your health is compromised,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I kind of got them to starting with Chai Gui Tong, right, which is Xiao Chai Hu Tong. minor bupleurum, and cinnamon twig. So,
Mhm.
right. But then I said, let's look at chai gojeji tong, bupleurum muscle releasing decoction, right? Because it has good gun, it has chung huo, it has a little short gao for inflammation. Love it for fibromyalgia. And then he
Oh.
said, I did that was a lecture I did, one formula, many diseases, on the flexible, like I like to unpack things, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
reuse them. But anyway, so he said, oh, so that's the formula for fibromyalgia. And I'm like, if the pattern matches. And he goes, oh yeah, I guess I better learn my formula. I'm like, yes, dude. We all love a trick. God knows I do too.
I love that. And the fact that when you give a formula, and we may think of a formula for one reason, and that formula can be applicable in so many different cases that have
Yeah.
either the same, either if it's for deficiency or if it's for particular excesses. Can you mention another formula that surprised you in its use? You had mentioned when you were preparing these lectures that there was a
Mhm.
formula that was commonly used for one thing that you found used for another thing.
Well, I think I was talking about the Ding Zhi Wan, that particular one. You would be amazed at how often the formula Sanrentang is used.
Ah,
3 kernel decoction. Do you know
yes.
that formula?
Yep, 3 seeds, yep.
Right, so it's 3 seeds, and what it does is, it's also kind of for latent pathogens, right? It's early stage damp warmth, not damp heat, but damp warmth. And it does it with this cool mechanism of like Xingren to get the lungs to move, Baijiu to open up and fragrantly transform stagnation in the middle burner, and then Yiren to drain it down. And then it's got like
Ah,
bamboo leaves and maybe talc to further drain damp, get rid of excess and dampness through urine. But it has this fragrant kind of unblocking and opening action. But it also is for damp warmth. So a lot of eye diseases that involve kind of like a turbid looking sclera, like yellowish, glump, like not clear, lack of clarity.
uh,
This formula is used often.
what a fantastic application for that formula.
Right. And so that's an example of something you'd never think would be used for the eyes, but in fact is used. God, there must have been at least 5 diseases.
Wow. Well, I remember what it was. You were mentioning a formula that I often think of for the eyes, and we learn as being good for the eyes, and then you found a very interesting, use for it regarding epidemic diseases. The, Qiju Diwang one.
Yeah. So I'm doing like a roundup. It's my last lecture. And I just thought, okay, let me just review common formulas that are used in ophthalmology that were discussed in my lectures, just to kind of round it up. And then I thought, oh, okay, just because, I always like to make more work for myself. I'm going to put them in order of the text that they were published and just make a slide of the text, just because maybe somebody's as geeky as me. And I didn't know this. I can't believe it. But Chiju Dihogwan is featured in a book on measles. So, but I don't have the original text, so I can't tell you, I can't contextualize it more than that, but that's where it is. And then I just went insane. It's not in my databases. I like, so putting together the Chinese and the pinyin and making sure the tones are right was like, well, there goes another hour of my life for one slide that doesn't matter much, but that's what I do.
But what a fascinating application for people who are listening. If you have the base of Lu Wei Diwangwan, which is going to nourish liver and kidney yin and then drain out some dampness, and then you're adding in goji berries and chrysanthemum, and how
Right.
that is applicable for measles and maybe the sequelae, like the recovery from measles?
I don't know, but it's important to remember that Liu Di Huangwan is a pediatric formula. It first
Uh,
appears in pediatric texts, and it may be that the measles is affecting the eyes. Like I said, I don't have a context for it. So
yeah, yeah.
I'm going to see if I can learn a little bit more. I'll tell you one place I feel somewhat like a failure in my classes is there's a very few texts available. One of them is Essentials from the Silver Sea.
Mm.
And there's a bunch of fruits that have huaijiao, which is the Szechuan peppercorns, right? And for the life of me, I cannot find a single reference for the eyes. I kept looking. I have looked everywhere. I've looked in the Shenong Ben Sao. I can't find a single eye citation. It's making me crazy, but I'm still hunting it. I'd really like to end the class saying, here's the key to the kingdom.
Right, right. I finally found it, right? As we start to bring this full circle here, as we're talking about herbs and we've just, discussed a few usages for the herbs, I want to ask you just a few more questions about your company. You have an
Oh,
herbal
yeah.
company where you dispense of herbs, you have custom herbal formulations and in a variety of forms. A number of practitioners use these companies as well as you use them for your own practice. Any advice that you would like to give to practitioners in terms of how you like to use herbs and how you see other practitioners using herbs? Is raw best? Are granules best? Do you like the liquid concentrates? Like, how do you determine what best use is for patients? Is it through ease? Is it through cost? Is it all of the above?
It's all of the above. I mean, at the end of the day, the herbs that get into a patient are the herbs that work. Um, so in my practice, and actually at China Herb, we are using fewer and fewer raw herbs. But where I think raw herbs are really essential is a serious condition like acute bronchitis, where I want a change right away and I need it to be robust. Like that's one example. Who else is on raw herbs right now? Oh, I have a patient, she has an ocular rosacea. We played around with granules and all this stuff. She said, you know what? It's just the raw herbs are working better. I just want to stay with that. Okay, that's fine. Because when I'm telling people about this, I say I have more flexibility, I have greater inventory. Let's start this way. It's not a contract. We can always renegotiate. Like, so there's that. If
Yeah.
people are traveling on airplanes, I generally give them granules just because if heaven forbid it spills,
Yeah.
it's just dirt. It's not going to stain your clothes.
Yeah.
And there isn't the liquid issue. The granules have become the biggest part of China herb at this point. It just grew.
Mm,
So that's something. And that just happened. That wasn't something we thought of. The liquid concentrates, we have these really beautiful low alcohol liquid concentrates. They're not alcohol extractions. So they really feel and taste and have the chi of herbs. These are beautiful. This is what I use probably the most in my practice because I really think you need to taste herbs.
yeah.
Everything that happens with herbs is mediated by the taste.
Yes.
And so I probably use those the most in my practice. But then, there's still a tiny bit of alcohol. So some people are quite sensitive to that. Sometimes with digestive disorders, the slower absorption, like of Shenling Bajisan, might be better. For some weird reason, I find Tianwang Bushengdang, just the little old Mayway tea pills, work really, really well and sometimes better than other forms. I can't even tell you why.
So for you, over the years, you've really seen that there's a lot of sort of criteria which would be the determining factors as to how you would prescribe the herbs, and depending on what the formula is or the individual patient's needs, to
Yeah.
have all of these things at hand, right?
Yeah.
You have all of them available to you.
Yeah, like I have bottles of Beyond Pion for sinus congestion on the shelf, and then we also have it in liquid. And
Yeah.
people have definite preferences, and they can have the one they want. And then most recently, I created a line of completely glycerin extracts for children because on Facebook, when I was doing my research, there were other lines that they really liked, but even though they had just like tiny bit of alcohol, which I think actually yields a better product, they just really objected to it. They weren't comfortable with it. So it took me a long time to figure that out. Like I think I was messing with it on and off for 2 years.
So they're exclusively glycerin based, then no alcohol at all.
No alcohol at all.
No.
No
Yeah.
alcohol at all.
Which is so great. I mean, regardless of whether there's a little bit or none at all, for parents to have the ability to have herbs at home to give to their kids. Children's chi is so robust, it usually responds so well in most
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah.
Being able to give herbs instead of having to wait and then ultimately, give your child a pharmaceutical when really you could probably avoid it.
Very often you can avoid it. I mean, beyond that, you want to know a company has herbs that have been tested for heavy metals and all those things, pesticide residues, molds, funguses. That's important.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you talk, you have so much flexibility because your practice has access to everything in your company and all of the different forms of herbs, that you have on hand. And I think that that's such a limitation for a lot of practitioners is that practitioners
Yes.
need to find the ability either through an online dispensary to have all of these options when they want to prescribe for a patient. And then what do you do if a patient comes in with an external invasion and they need an herb that day? You can't
You need to
order.
have like a little menu of stuff for acute
Yeah. Yeah.
problems. Like, at Six Fishes, I teach this community workshop called Medicine Cabinet Makeover. And it's got like, here's what you need, right?
Yeah.
Everybody loves it. Here's your basic stuff for colds, for a stomach ache, for, traveler's stuff, or here's your
Yes.
basic stuff that you need to have for everyday complaints. And those should be in pills and
You
they
know,
last forever.
we should have a handbook for every Chinese medicine student, every new practitioner, that they can then teach their patients about what they need to stock at home, teach them how to use it, and then sell those products to them.
Right. But one thing that I think helps people, aside from acute things, it is not practical, and it's usually a money loser to have a giant pharmacy yourself, unless you have a big practice. And that's where we come in, because now we have this software from Dispensary Tree. We're actually his first customers, but we were like up against a wall. It was either we had to grow, we needed the software for online ordering, or we were going to die. So I took a leap of faith. It was new, and we did it. And so you can order a formula, and you can do it in any form, raw, but or you can order a product.
Yep.
And then you can create a markup if you want. You can send the patient a payment link, so you're never on the hook in case they ghost you, which has happened to me numerous times. And then it's drop shipped to them.
Wow.
And then you can even set it for them to be able to reorder online for as many times as you think is okay before you want them to check in with you.
Yep. Yep. Very, very important for practitioners to have a certain number that they have on hand in the office, and then an easy way to be ordering herbs for their patients and have that access, have that availability. There's one other thing that I saw that I did want to remember to ask you about is through your company, you have prescriptions for bone broth recipes.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Actually, we're doing a new website, so I was just working on that page.
I love that.
Yeah.
You have I think there's a variety, maybe there's 8 or 9 different bone broth recipes where the herbs, you have a combination of an herbal formula that
Mhm.
then you prescribe for the patient, and then they boil it up at home with their bone broth.
Right,
And wow, I thought that is just so cool. And a number of them are, obviously formulas that may be nourishing, like for postpartum moms or
right. I made Shanghua tongue because and that's so important postpartum. I made
yeah.
like the 9 flavors for beautiful hair and,
Oh.
some immune stuff. And so, yeah, and if you're a vegetarian, you could just make a seaweed broth or a miso soup,
Yep.
and you could use any old stock. If it's bone broth, it's even more nourishing, but you don't have to make it so fancy. Just, like, do it.
Yep.
And then you've got the added depths of the broth.
Yes.
You could add a little fresh ginger, add some scallions while you're at it.
I just thought that was the coolest idea, and what a fun thing. You're treating patients and you're doing whatever you're doing with them, but then if it's applicable, to be able to prescribe them a bone broth formula that they can
Yeah,
make
I will say,
themselves.
I don't think it's unique to me. Like, in fact, at this show, I saw Chemo has theirs. I think a couple other people have them. I just made mine, the ones that I want that make sense to me, and I structured them specifically in the way I like them. But I love them,
Yeah.
and patients love them too. I also created these foot soaks. Every single thing I created is always like to solve a problem. That's where it comes from, right? So this foot soaks start with my daughter jumped out of a fire, broke both her feet. I made a
Oh,
bone mending soak. Yeah, that wasn't good.
your daughter?
My daughter.
Oh my
Yeah, this was
gosh.
a
Okay.
bunch of years ago. It
Okay.
was before the pandemic. Yeah, before the pandemic.
Yikes.
Um, and then I had a patient with plantar fasciitis. So then I created a foot soak, but it actually has like stretchy herbs like Shenjinsao, the moss, and sung, yeah, the pine notes, right? Those are like make things stretchy. So it's not bones,
Ah.
it's tendons. Then I made a neuro soak for neuropathy.
Mm.
I have an itchy soak, for, like, athlete's foot. I don't that one doesn't sell as much. I know I haven't pushed it much. So like that, but, like, I broke my ankle the night of the Super Bowl. So stupid. I just, like, walked
You were
out.
partying too much. You were cheering for your team, right?
I was like, climbed a grease pole, and I jumped off. Well, it was just really stupid. Ankle went sideways, but I healed the bone in 3 weeks and 2 days because I used that. I also used Evil Bone Water. I
Wow.
did acupuncture. I did all the things. Like, I did all the things. Homeopathy.
Wow.
I walked my
Wow.
talk with it. So,
Yeah. Everything. All of the tools at your disposal to heal
mhm,
that. That's amazing.
yeah, and I used my foot soaks. and they're relaxing. You just sit there, if you have foot spots, even nicer because it bubbles.
And, I mean, what an amazing prescription for a patient, because not only, of course, is the foot soak giving them the herbal medicine to treat their condition, but then it's forcing them to actually sit down and relax for 20 minutes.
That's the money. There you go. You must relax
I
for
tell a
30
lot of
minutes.
patients to do some Tai Chi or Qigong, and I don't know how many of them actually follow through on it. But following through on a foot soak and just giving yourself some relaxation time, I bet people really appreciate.
Yeah, we get a lot of compliance with that. A lot of compliance with that.
We're gonna have to start to wrap it up. I feel like I could talk
Yeah.
to you forever and just keep talking about herbs. One of my goals with this podcast is to really elevate the appreciation for herbal medicine within our greater community. We certainly, we need it. And, given the situation with the conventional medical system and the pharmaceutical industry, I think this is a ripe time for herbal medicine to take its rightful place in terms of people's health. So thank you for everything that you've been talking about today in terms of cases and, some ways to give practitioners some additional confidence with prescribing.
Yeah, that's really what I want. Acupuncturists who are herbalists out there, I want you to use herbs. Herbal medicine is beautiful.
For practitioners who want to find you,
Mhm.
your practice itself is sixfishes.com, and that's your two locations where you actually have offices. And then your company is chinaherbco.com, and we'll have
Mhm.
this all in the transcript. I'll make sure that it's typed out correctly so people
And
can
then
see
the
that.
teaching is chinaherbseminars.com.
chinaherbseminars.com. And I think that a lot of people will really love these cases that you're doing through the seminars with ophthalmology, with ear, nose, and throat, even with you said gynecology and cholesterol. There are so many classes that you're teaching through those seminars that I think can really help to elevate people's use of herbs and
Yeah, actually, and
diagnosis.
a fun thing on the website is Juliet Ayana. I don't know if you know who she is, but she's a Chinese medical dermatologist and she's so smart. And so she has a free ethics class on recognizing eczema on people with darker skin. And that's really great. And then also treating lichen sclerosis, general lichen sclerosis. That's a paid course. I've got her courses up there too, which is just fantastic. She's so smart.
Oh, that's wonderful, wonderful. I hope people who are listening can go to that site and find those classes. I had one last question for you before we
Okay.
head off. You are so vibrant, and you look like you're pretty healthy outside of that broken ankle from jumping off of a pole. You are very healthy. What do you do to stay healthy? What do you enjoy doing? Whether it's something from our medicine or something else, like, what do you do in your life?
What do I do? Well, I just worked out literally for the first time since recovering from this ankle was like took me out. So I just had a really hard workout before I hopped on with you. And generally in my life overall, I've been an exerciser. I don't know. Maybe it's genes. I don't know. Lucky, I guess. But thank you because I just turned 65.
I would imagine being really passionate and loving what you do. From everything I've learned from you as we've talked and from all of the things that you've done throughout your career, it sounds like you're always constantly evolving and um
Maybe a little too much. I could learn to work less.
but keeping yourself passionate for sure.
Mhm, mhm. You know what? This is a good profession, and anybody who's young who's listening to this, like, look at me. There's a bunch of us who've been in it over 40 years
Yeah.
because there's always more to learn. You can't be bored.
Yep.
I'll share one thing that might help students because it helped me. But when I was interning with Ted, he said, "Cara, pay attention." It wasn't that I was spaced out. It was just pay attention. That's carried me through my career.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. The answers are there if you're looking for them.
Just be calm and listen and pay
Yeah.
attention.
Thank you so much for being here today.
What a delight. I love talking to you.
And you're going to hear from me again because, as I said, there are a plethora of things that we could discuss. So there will be more conversations in the future.
Oh,
And thank you to all of our listeners for being here today.
but you're a total delight. Thanks very much.
That's all for today's episode of Elevated Practice. I'd like to express my gratitude to our guests today and always for sharing their wisdom with all our listeners. I hope you were able to take away some insights, practical knowledge, or inspirational ideas that you can apply right away to elevate your own practice. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about Elevated Practice. If you have an idea for an episode or a recommendation for a guest, please respond in the comments or message me, Gretchen Badami, directly through social media. Thank you, and I can't wait for you to hear our next episode.